Hey guys, welcome back. And in this video, we're going to be starting our ReactJS learning journey. This one's going to be a bit different. We're going to be creating games instead of just websites using ReactJS. These are websites, but they have games as their main theme in them. So to start off, we'll be creating a Tic Tac Toe game, and this is going to be a three-part video series of Tic Tac Toe, where in the first two videos we'll create the game, and in the third video we'll deploy it to the open web, and we'll let other people also access this interactive Tic Tac Toe. So without any further ado, let's jump into the video. In this tutorial, what I'll be showing you is how to build a tic-tac-toe game in React, as I already said. And there are certain things that you have to know as prerequisites. Like, for example, I do guess that you guys know basic HTML and JavaScript. Like, for example, you know the basic HTML syntax of writing. And in JavaScript, I think you're familiar with functions, objects, arrays, and in particular, arrow functions, classes, components, and all of these. And if you don't have an idea about these, I would recommend that you go ahead and learn whatever you don't know and then come to this video. So for this video, what you need to have is two things. One is a must and the other is just to follow along with me. The must is the Node.js. You have to download that. So you go to download Node.js and then you get the particular OS which you need. Like for example, for Windows install if you need that. So based on that, you will be getting the Node.js, and I do have the latest one, and I'll be also posting the link of this webpage in the description. So go ahead and click the first link. And then next is Git. Git is just so that you could follow along with me, but it's also a recommended thing that you have Git installed if you don't work on Linux. So you go to download Git, and I'll be posting this link also. Will be a second one in the description. So you get the one which is for your particular OS. Once both of them are done, you direct yourself to the particular folder wherever you are creating this app. Like I'm creating it on my desktop for now. You right click over there and you get git bash here. So you do that. First we'll go ahead and we'll check the version of Node we have. So we'll do node -- version, and you should have the latest version. So these are the basic outline which we're going to be creating. Now let's go ahead and let's create the app. Now once you have the node which you have to install and you have the git, what we'll first go ahead and we'll create the React app. And to create a React app, what you need in basic is npx and you give create -react-app, and that goes ahead and creates a React app, and follow that you have to give the name of the file which you're going to say. And I'm going to create the folder called tic-tac-toe. So this will create a folder called Tic Tac Toe, and inside the folder you'll have the React components. Once you have the folder ready, what you do is you go into that folder, say cd Tic Tac Toe, and by tab space it will auto complete it. You go inside that folder and then you open your code editor. So for example, if you're using VS Code, you just do code and then space and a dot, and that would open VS Code inside that folder. So right off the bat, we'll go ahead and just delete all the things inside the source folder. You can like permanently delete all of them. That's done. Now why I've deleted everything from the source folder is that whatever goes inside the source folder is basically what's going to be displayed outwards. And that's like the main thing which is going to work out there. Although it's not like exactly displayed, what it does is whatever is there in the source, you make it accessible to the public, which has the index.html. And this is what will be rendered to the web browser. Like for example, let me go ahead and change the title out here. We'll change it to Tic Tac Toe. And this would be changed to the title of the web page. You can see that later. For now, we'll just change the title and we'll save it. So let's go inside the source folder. And inside the source folder, I want you to create two files. One is a CSS file and one is a JavaScript file. We'll call both of them with index. So we just call the JavaScript as index.js and the CSS as index.css. Okay, so we've created both of them. First, we have to go ahead and we have to import certain things so that this is shown as a React file, React JavaScript file instead of just a basic JavaScript file. And that will be React and React DOM. So we'll go ahead and do that. import React from React, and similarly React DOM, and React DOM is also from React DOM. Now since React works in sync with the CSS, let's import that too out here. So we'll do import, and CSS is in the same folder, so we'll do / and we'll give index.css. Okay, so this is the basic importing done. Now let's go ahead and write the main code. So first, whenever you see a tic-tac-toe game, basically it's just 9 squares put together in such a form that it's just 3 by 3 kind of effect. So first we'll go ahead and we'll write the square, and the square is written as a class in React. So we'll write class square, and this square, it basically extends the React component. So we'll just do extends React dot component. So basically that's the square, and we wanted to use the React component and create that class. Now let's go ahead and let's create the class of square. What we need is basically something which creates the square kind of effect, and that square is basically a button. So we'll use render, and render will just put it out to the web, and render will take whatever we write inside that and it'll return that. So for that we need to use the return statement, so it returns it outwards. And what we have here is the button. Now this one has a class name. Like in HTML we used to write classes so we can access it in the CSS. Similarly in React or in JavaScript as a whole, you have something called as a class name, because you can't use class because it's already used. So we need to find another thing. So we use class name so that we can use this to style it in the CSS, and we'll call this class a square, and this is where the button is going to be present. Now let's finish it with a semicolon, and this is the square class. So this is the basic square. Now each of these squares will result in formation of a board, and that is a separate class by itself. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll say class board. Even this extends the React component, and similarly this has to first basically render the square out, this square which we're using here, and for that we are using a separate thing called as a render square. We are creating a function, so based on the I which we give, a square will be created using the render square, and the render square, what it returns is a basic square. So whenever you create a class in ReactJS, you are creating a HTML kind of tag using the class name. So I can go ahead and I can write a HTML tag with the square element. So we'll return a square basically, and this is a self-closing tag. Okay, now you must have noticed before writing this I had a yellow kind of line out here like this. That means that I haven't used it. I've defined it but not used it. Now it's gone because I've defined it and used it, which is out here. I've used it. Now let's go ahead and let's do the rendering, which is the basic effect. So we want to render something, and what all do we want it to render? We wanted to return the statement on the top which you saw, next player, and also the board, the main board which you saw, and their button. The button which you saw in the bottom to click to refresh, we'll be working on that later. For now we'll just work on the text on the top and the board which we've created. So for the text we are going to create a constant, because every time it's going to change from X to O to O to X. So it's going to change. So we'll create a constant, and this constant is called a status, and it's a string, and we'll call this as next player X. For now we'll just give it as X, and we'll return something because render has to return something in the end. And what we wanted to return is a div as a whole. When you want to just return one element, we'll just write that element. But if you want to return something huge like the board itself as a whole thing, we have to wrap it inside a div or a nothing tag. Basically nothing tag is you don't have a div or anything, it's like this, but I just want to return it in a div for now. And inside that div I have the basic things called, one is the status and one is the board. So I call it div, and like HTML you can go and write dot status and just create a class name of status. Now what I wanted to display here is this status which I've created here. So let's go ahead and use that. And in JavaScript, you must remember that to return any kind of variable which we already stored, we use the curly braces and we return it. and the other div is the board which we're gonna have. Yeah, now for the board, what we wanted to have is rendering squares. So this is gonna have render squares in rows. So 0, 1, 2 first, then there'll be a separate board row, and in another row you have 3, 4, 5, and then another row you have 6, 7, 8. So first let's go and write div, and we'll call this as board dash row. You can actually avoid this div, sorry about that. Okay, now inside this board row, we'll go ahead and we'll render the square, and for that we use this function which we have written out here, and we'll call that using the this keyword. So we do this dot render square, and this is the 0th square. So as like out here, it's a variable and we use curly braces. Similarly, it's a variable and we're using curly braces. And let's do 1 and 2 out here. So we'll do 1 and we'll do 2. This is the first row created. So let me like save this and show it to you right now. And to actually work with HTML, you used to use the live server, but for React, it's a bit different. You have to run it using npm. So what we do is you do npm and you give start, and you click on that. So it will take some time, and once it's done, you should have this running. So I have a localhost at 3000 running this. So now you actually cannot see this being rendered out because you have to use the React DOM for that. So let me go ahead and do some more work, and let us create the whole thing, and then we'll go to React DOM. So this is the first row. We copy this and let's paste it. This will be a second row. The second row, it will start off with 3, 4, 5, and then the third row, it will start off with 6 and go on till 8. 6, 7 and 8. And this is the basic board which is created. So now we have the board. Now how are we going to show it out to people out there is basically by using React DOM. So to do that, what you got to do is you have to use React DOM.render, and let's do that. We'll do React DOM dot render, and we'll put in colon, and let's render this board class out. So for that, we'll do board, and it's a self-closing tag like I already told you, comma, and where do we want it to be rendered? In the index.html file, and we want it to be rendered to id root. So let's do that. What we do is we do document dot get element by id, and the id it has is root, and we finish it with a semicolon here. So once you save it, you can refresh it and you can see you have the next player. This is the first board row, second board row, and the third board row. Now let's go ahead and let's use CSS to style it, and we'll come again to the JavaScript file and we'll work on the components of like clicking on it and you have the X and then you have the O and you determine the winners and all. Let's work on the CSS first now. So first we'll go ahead and we'll give the text. I'll just put this on the side so you can see the website also alongside. So what I'll do is I'll do body, and we'll give a font. The font size I'll determine to be 5 rem, and the one font which I'll give it is Century Gothic, and if that does not render, let's use sans serif, which is the famous one. Most websites do have that. Okay, now we have font and we've got the Century Gothic also on. Okay, that's great. Now let's go ahead and we'll write for the square, the component which we have out here. So we'll write for square dot square. But before we go to the square, we actually have to increase the board row size so we can work on each of the squares. So let's work on the board row first. So we'll do board row, and after it gets like, basically after is like a pseudo element. So after the actual content loads up, what we wanted to do, and like once you refresh it, let's say for the second time, what I wanted to do is I wanted to clear everything. When you put both, it just clears the whole thing, and the content out there should be set to null. So we don't have any content. Why I'm doing this is once I refresh, I want a separately new board out there, and this display will be taken as table. Yep. Now that's the board row. And let me go ahead and let me give some effect to the style too. Like for example, I give the color out there, and I'll keep the text aligned out there too. We'll do status and we'll give the margin bottom to be like 5 rem, so there's like some space between the text and the board. And we'll give text align center, so it's there, and we'll give a display flex too for this, so the text align works properly. Align items. If ever, let me see, if ever you're working with a smaller mobile, for example, it perfectly aligns the element in the center and keeps it there. And if it's a bigger screen, it just keeps it to the side, and we don't want it to be in the center actually. So that's fine for now. So for the square, let's first increase the size of the square. So we'll keep the height and width to be 10 rem each. So we have each of the squares increased in size. That's great. Next, we'll give a background of white because I want the text to have a grayish color. So we'll give a background of white. That's also fine. And let's give a border of 1 pixel, solid, and a gray, which is hashtag 999. Okay, that's perfectly done to there. And we'll do a float of left. So the objects, like it's like a proper board, there's no space between them. That's done. Now we'll give the font size, like if ever you enter X or O, I want the font size to be like around 8 rem, smaller than the height and the width because it has to fit in there properly. And I'll give a font weight to it too, like bold. Now we set the font weight to be bold. Let's save that. You can't actually see it now, but once you like put in the variables there, you can actually like work with it. So let's put the font weight over there too. And last but not the least, let's put the text align to be center. So whatever text you put, it aligns it itself in the center. Now the one thing is that if you go to it in responsive, the box is actually not properly aligned. So the one thing we have to do it, let's do it with a media query, and we'll see media screen and max width. So we'll put it to be max width, and we'll give a max width of usually the devices, the mobile devices, like let me put it for iPad Pro, it's 1024. That works perfectly fine. iPad is also fine. So it starts bothering when it's at around like 750. So we'll put it around like 750 pixels. And one thing which you're going to change is dot square. We'll change the font size, the height, the width, everything. So let's go ahead. We'll change the height to be like 5 rem, the width to be like 5 rem. I'm still working on this. If you think that's too small, you can check it out later. To it to be 4 rem. Let's save it. Let's make it responsive, and let's go to, like, for example, let's say Moto G4. Okay, it's small. Let's increase the size, so height and the width. So 6, and we'll give it 6, and we'll give the font of 5. So let's save it. Okay, that's there. That's good. Let's put it to 6.5, for example, and let's put the width also to 5.5. Font to be 5.3. You save it, it increases size. I think this is perfectly fine. Now you can actually like create the game. Okay, that's cool. So we have made it responsive to out here using the media query. Now what I'm going to work is the focus. Basically when you like hover over it, what kind of effect? It's similar to that but a bit different. So you do square focus, and while it's focusing, the outline should be set to none, and the background should be set to hashtag DDD. You can add this if you want. I'm just making it more stylish, so it's there. So that's the CSS done. Now let's go ahead and let's like create the first element, so that when you like click on it, their X's appear. For now we'll just work with that, and we'll conclude this video, and in the next video we'll work on more stuff. Now there's going to be something which you're going to work with. Like I'm going to show you some effects so that you can work with that first, and then there's going to like basically like get your feet wet a bit, and then we'll go ahead and write the CS code. So for now what we'll do is we'll like pass a prop, like for example a value to the square component out here, and we'll call this value to be same as the I which you give out here, and we have to make that work in this. So that's what we're going to work out here. We call this dot props dot value. This would basically say whatever you're giving in there, display it in the square button. That's the props value. Now let me save this and you refresh it. So whatever was given here as the eye, it went to the square and then that got displayed here. Now you can see the font weight and all of it. Now if you want to remove the font weight, like I don't want the font weight, basically I'll remove it. Now it looks pretty great. Yes, now that looks fine. Let's keep it this way. We save it and that's done. So now what I wanted to do is, basically whenever you click on it, I wanted to put X there. So first I'm going to see if the clicking works actually. So whenever somebody clicks on that, that's I'm going to do, give on click, and on the click of that I want to give an alert message. So that's a function. You can use an arrow function here too, but I'm just going to use the basic function component. And on the click of that, I want to give an alert message, and the message should read click. That's easy. Yep. Now you save it, we'll refresh this page. Now if I click on it, there's an alert which says click, and if we click on it, same thing. So it works for all of them. So that's fine, that's great. Now the alert message works. So the next step is, now the click, whenever you click on that, it should place a X there and you should remember that. To remember stuff, what components do is they use a state, and that's what we're going to be doing now. You can remove this on click function if you want to. Yeah. Now that's done, we'll save it. Now to the squares, what you got to do is you got to create a constructor. So we'll go out here, and this constructor will take in the props which you give, and what we'll do is it will do a super of the props. Super is basically go to the higher level of this props, super of this props, and it will change this dot state. That's what you used to remember, right? And that value will be for now set to null, because you're just starting the game, you actually haven't put in anything over here yet. This way we basically add a constructor to the class to initialize the state. Now what we want is, we want the value of the state to be changed to X when we click on this. And how are we going to do that? Is by using the on click function here. So we do on click, and on the click of that, what I wanted to do is create an arrow function. You can create a function. I just keep on swapping between them because I just want you to show what all ways you can do it. Now let me go ahead and create an arrow function, and this arrow function will go to this dot the state which we have here, and this state. Now this state, we have to change the value of this value, and for that what we got to do is set the state of this, set state, and set state what we want to do. We want to change the value out there. So we say value and we change it to X. So now we have changed the state value to be X, but we wanted to display it. So for that, we don't do this dot props, we do this dot state dot value. So this dot state dot value will go here and it will display the X. So you save this and we refresh this. Now the board is null. Click on it, you get X, get X, get X. So that's created. Now what we got to do is, basically we've got to do work with the X and the O's. So there's the alteration and all of that, and that's what we are going to be looking into in the next video.